Right. The purpose of this is to solve the problem that when using MS Query within Microsoft Excel, 2010 in this case, but it works with all versions, having been invented in the 1990s. The problem is that the directory or folder in which your file is located is hardwired. It's typed in to the process that sets up the process. That means then, while it works beautifully on my computer, if I give the file to you and you put it on your computer, if you do not put the file into exactly the same location as that where I had mine on my computer, it won't work. It will come up with an error. So this is my test data. I'm going to do this from scratch. So we'll kill that file. Do I want to save? Save it, I suppose. Right, we've quit Excel. Now I'm going to fire up Excel. Doing this very steadily because it's taken many hours to work this out. So a new file, just to make sure that there's no no cheating, but it's not so much about cheating, it's about making sure that none of my previous work interferes, in fact makes something work when it shouldn't, which can happen because we're dealing with file locations. So brand new sheet. Now the first thing I'm going to do is actually to save it, because with the way I'm doing this, which is making a query that works on the file which contains the query, so it's working on itself, then it needs a copy of itself to already have been saved, otherwise it cannot find itself. May sound a bit philosophical, but there we are. So, well, okay, there's my test data. May as well set it up, I suppose. What am I going to call this sheet? Going to call it Purple, P-E-U-P-L-E. I think it's French for people, actually. I'm using that name because I've used all the other names for field names in all my previous experiments, and I want to make sure that this is different. Sheet, I'll call this, I've used query before, I'll use answers. That didn't work very well. I meant that to be down here. A-N-S-W-E-R-S. And I prefer my query sheet to be at the front. So, there's my test data. There. And answers here, there's nothing in there yet. So no, as promised, alright, I'm going to save it. It's got something in it. I'm saving it in the default location, which up here, this says computer local disk C documents. So it's the folder called C:\documents, which I'm using for demonstration purposes rather than something with a long complicated name. I'm going to call this file qtest99. I'm running out of names. XLSX it will save as. You could also do it as XLS. Now, for the sake of completeness, I'm going to go into File Options and check. Here we are, Options here in the File menu, and under Save, I want it fourth one down, I'm looking for default file location here, which is set to C documents. That's why when I chose File Save, the directory folder that it offered me was C:\documents. If it had been a folder called test set in there, it would have offered me the folder called test. And it's very important, it's crucial to understand this, that this default file location is where Excel will put things unless you tell it otherwise. So click OK. I haven't changed anything, I'm just making a note of that. So I'm going to quit Excel completely. Go to my computer, drive C, documents, and QTest99 is down here. You can see all these other test files where I've been struggling with this. Excel 2010. Now, I'm going to do a query. Here's the people, here's the answers. Get rid of sheet 3 so it doesn't interfere. Go to the answers sheet. I'll zoom that to give it a bit more size. Choose the data menu, from other sources, from Microsoft Query. Choose data source is actually data source type, so Excel files. Click OK. C documents has come up in the select workbook. Again, this C documents here, I hope you can see that, is selected from the options directory which we looked at just now. I'll just prove that. Quit out of Microsoft Query, File, Options, Save, Default File Location. Default File Location, there we go. So, from other sources, Microsoft Query, Excel files, OK. Don't know what that dialog's doing up there. Do wish it wouldn't do that. It's offering me directory C documents. I could navigate somewhere else, but by default it offers me this directory first. I'm looking for this very file that I'm working in, which we know is called QTest99. Click OK. And I want the two headings of my test data, which are in the people purple folder sheet. Click the greater than and I get the name and number coming up. Next, I don't want to limit my query, I don't want to sort it or order it. I do want my data to return to Excel because we're not doing anything particularly complicated. Existing worksheet at A1. Click OK, and there it is. That's the query that's come up from here. So if we change George to, I know, Nathaniel, oops, N-E-T-H, Nathaniel, change his phone number to that, answers. Now that has not refreshed, however, data, refresh, there it is, Nathaniel 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc. Now that's all straightforward, apart from the fact we're working on data which was in the same file. We're using an get external data function here to get data from another sheet in the same file. The trick is to have saved the file in the first place. What pleasantly surprises me is that even if I make a change in the unsaved file, once I've saved it once, it knows where to get the data, because the data on the version on the disk is different once I make a change in here. So I think that's pretty cool, actually. I mean, there are many other ways of doing these sorts of things, but this gives the benefits of SQL, which is the point of all of this. So, if I give you this file, it won't work, because you'll go and put it into your My Documents folder, for example. So, then you say, oh, it doesn't work. Quite right too. So what I'm going to do is, under the Data tab, Connections, there's one in here, one workbook connection. Makes it nice and easy for us. You need to be clear about that, because you can find you're working on the wrong one because they look very, very similar. Properties. Connection properties, connection name, usage. Enable background refresh. I've noticed it doesn't seem to do that when I make a change, but it does it when it's to an external file and I'm not querying data from the same file. So definition. Here you can see connection string. Ignore that, however tempting it is. Down here in command text, this is the command text which you will find in the MS Query wizard, in fact, as well. So you could arguably change it there. However, I'm changing it here. I'm backspacing out over C documents / so that in the SQL query it has from and then just the file name without a path. OK. I get an error message. Too few parameters, expected 1. Was this information helpful? Well, it's frightening, so we ignore it completely. The following query failed to refresh. Shall we continue to refresh? Well, I'm going to say no, because I don't want it to complete the process. And close the workbook connections dialog. Now, based on that error message, I would have expected the query to no longer function. So first of all, I'll simply run a refresh, and nothing appears to happen. So, I didn't change any data, so of course I can't tell if anything would have happened or not. So I'm going to change this data here to 09876543 for most of them, but not all of them. If I run a query and it's working, it has worked. That should mean that if I save this file in a location different from where it is now, and then load it, provided, this is the absolute crucial key, I change the Excel options save default directory, this one here, Excel options save default file location, C documents. As long as I make that match the directory from which I have opened my file, it will work. And that's what I'm about to demonstrate. So, in fact, I'll do it now. Documents, change that to, I don't know, a completely different drive called test queue, which doesn't actually exist at the moment, so I better just make sure that it does. Computer D new folder TSQ. Right, dtestq now exists. Click OK, so the default file location is now set to dtestq. Now, of course, if what I'm saying is right, this query shouldn't work anymore. Let's see what happens. An error message, basically saying the Microsoft Access Database Engine, which is the one that we use for reading Excel files, could not find the object purple. In other words, it couldn't find the field. Make sure the object exists and that you spell its name and path correctly. Well, there we go. We have changed its path by changing the default location and unhardwiring the location of the file from the SQL query, from the MS Query string. It's difficult to make this sound simple because so much of the so many of the words, the language, so much of the language is sort of alien, foreign, techie speak, geek speak. In fact, all you need to do to make it work is delete the directory name from that query string and make sure that you open the file from the default working directory, the default. I'm having terrible trouble remembering what that's called. They've tried to make it simple, but they've changed it from default current directory, for default file location. So, without further ado, save the file, just to be sure. Click, click. I'm quitting Excel completely, and I'm now going to go find my file, which is in C documents. There it is. Going to cut it. Cut. Going to go to D, test Q, paste. There's the file. Clickety click. Open the file in Excel. Data connection has been disabled. It's a security thing. This is all my stuff on my machine, so I know it's safe to enable it. You need to be sure about that for your machine. However, enable content. Now, I've moved this file. I haven't changed anything in it. I have deleted that string in the SQL query string, so I've removed the name of the working directory, but I haven't changed the name of the working directory. I've just removed it, the default file location. So, will this work in here? This is as if I've given it to you and you've put it into your default file location and you're about to run the same query. Well, nothing seemed to change, so it certainly didn't fail to run, which it did before when it couldn't find the field that it was looking for. So, what happens now? I've changed some test data. Presto. What we've got here, he says, with some joy, is a file which I've created, an MS Query in Excel. In fact, it would be me who deletes the folder, the directory from the SQL query string. And I give you the file, and as long as you put it into your main folder where you keep all your Excel files, and Excel knows that that's your save default file location as shown here, then the query will work. And of course, if you put it somewhere else, then you've got to change the default file location. That's the trick, or the key. It's also the gotcha, because if you don't put the file in the default file location, the query won't work. So in most instances, for most people who keep their Excel files in their default file location, they will have no problem at all and it will work fine. If they move the file somewhere else, then it won't. But the key is, this gives us the ability to share these files without having to write a complex code. All you have to do is make sure that it's in the standard working files location. Enough said, I think. All the best. This is Anthony Mello.